Erev Tov Rabotai, we're continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Shabbat. We are up to Perek Vav Mishnah Chet. Today's Mishnayot should be Leilu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Aranbayim, Neriyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Menuchatam Began Eden, Amen. This Mishnah discusses the accessories of an amputee as regards Shabbat and other halachic matters. Hakitea Yotze Bekav Shelo Divrei Rabbi Meir. Someone whose foot was amputated may go outside on Shabbat wearing his false foot because it is considered like his shoe. This is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Now, the Rav explains, what does it mean, false foot? It refers to a false wooden foot that has a hole into which the amputee inserts his stump. Now, Rabbi Meir holds that a false foot is considered a shoe, even though the amputee does not use it for walking by pressing his weight on it, but he moves about on crutches. But Rabbi Yossi prohibits an amputee to go outside on Shabbat with a false foot, because the Rav explains Rabbi Yossi rules that a false foot is not considered a shoe because the amputee does not use it for walking but only to disguise his defect, and as such it is deemed a carried item. And the Rav says V'alachak Rabbi Yossi, the halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. V'im yesh lo bet kibul kitutim tameh. Another law about a false foot: if the hole of a false foot has room for padding, the false foot can become tameh, which the Mefarshim explain. If the opening in the false foot is large enough to hold not only the amputee's stump, but also padding to cushion the stump, the false foot can become tameh. Now, the rule is that a wooden object can receive tumah, impurity, only if it has a cavity in which something is stored and carried. Therefore, a wooden foot cannot become tameh unless it has room to store and carry padding. If it has room only for the amputee's stump and not for any padding, it does not become tameh because the false foot does not carry the stump. Rather, the stump carries the false foot. The Mishnah deals with the laws of knee pads that are worn by someone who cannot use his feet and must crawl on his knees, which the Rav explains. If someone had both feet amputated, God forbid, and can move about only by crawling on his knees, he wears leather knee pads on his knees and shins to protect them. Samochot shelot mein midras. His supports, which refers to knee pads, can become tameh under the laws of midras because they support his weight. Now, the law of midras, literally being stepped on, states that when a zava, or a nida puts his or her weight on an object whose primary use is to support the weight of a human being, like a chair or a bed, it becomes tameh with the same level of tumah as the person himself, namely av hatumah, as the Torah states in Sefer Vayikra, chapter 15, Psukim 4 through 6, and Mishnayot Kelim, chapter 1, Mishnah 3. Now, usually, when one item transmits tumah to another, the tumah of the second item is weaker than the tumah of the first. But in the case of midras, however, the object that receives tumah is just as tameh as the source of the tumah. Now, knee pads are included in this law because they are intended to support the weight of the invalid who wears them. Now, hence, if he is a zav, his knee pads become an av tumah like him. V'yotzin b'hen b'Shabbat, and he may wear them outside on Shabbat because they are like clothes, which the Mefarshim explain, since these knee pads protect his legs as he, so to speak, walks, they are like any other garment he wears to protect his body, which may be worn outside on Shabbat. V'nichnesin b'hen b'azara, and he may wear them into the temple courtyard because they are not shoes. Now the Rav explains, Mishnah in Berachot, chapter 9, Mishnah 5 tells us it is forbidden to wear shoes in the temple courtyard. However, the Rav says only something that is worn at the end of one's leg is considered a shoe. Therefore, knee pads, which are worn on the knees and the shins, are not considered shoes and may be worn in the temple courtyard. The Mishnah now discusses the mobile chair and leg supports that are worn by someone who cannot use his legs. Now, the Mefarshim explain, someone who cannot use either of his legs because, God forbid, both legs are paralyzed, he straps himself to a short and movable chair and uses crutches to push himself from one place to another. On his feet or at the end of his stumps, he wears leather or wooden leg supports, which like shoes or false feet, which help to prop up his legs as he pulls himself forward. The diagram brought down by the Arts Elucidated would help visualize this situation. The Mishnah says, Kiseh v'samochot shelo tmein midras. His mobile chair and leg supports can become tameh under the law of midras, like we explained, because they support his weight. Ve'en yotzin ben b'Shabbat, but he may not wear the leg supports outside on Shabbat because they might fall off and be carried, which the Mefarshim explain, since the invalid's legs do not rest firmly on the ground, his leg supports can easily fall off and he might carry them in the Reshut HaRabim, in the public domain. Therefore, the rabbis prohibited wearing leg supports on Shabbat. However, the invalid may use his mobile chair and crutches on Shabbat because they are like clothes and there's no concern that he might carry them because he cannot move about without them. And he may not wear the leg supports into the temple courtyard because they're considered shoes. And the Mefarshim explain, unlike the knee pads that we mentioned earlier in the Mishnah, these leg supports are worn at the end of the legs, at the end of the stumps or on the feet, and therefore they're considered shoes and may not be worn in the temple courtyard. The chair and crutches, however, are not shoes, and so it is permissible to wear them in the temple courtyard. The Mishnah now discusses one other item as regards to Tumah, and Shabbat. An katmin teorin. Masks are always tahor, meaning they cannot become tameh, because they are not deemed to be utensils. Then yotzin bahen, and one may not wear them outside on Shabbat because they are not considered clothes. That is in Rabotai of Mishnah Chet. Mishnah Tet now continues, Habanim yotzin biksharim. Young boys may go outside on Shabbat with laces tied to their arms. Now the Mefarshim explained there was a custom that if a father is leaving his young son and knows that the boy will not be able to bear his departure, he would take his right shoelace and tie it to his son's left arm. People thought that as long as the lace was tied to the boy's arm, it acted as a charm to remove his yearning for his father. That's how the Mefarshim bring it down. Now, since the string is made for healing, it is considered like an item of jewelry which may be worn on Shabbat. It's comparable to an amulet made by an expert, which is permissible, like we learned in Mishnah 2. Ubnei melachim bazogin. Princes may go outside on Shabbat with decorative bells sewn onto their clothing. Now, these bells either have no clappers or are plugged up so that they cannot ring. If a bell can ring, a person may not wear it on Shabbat because of the prohibition of Ashmat Kol, making sound on Shabbat, which is prohibited. V'chol adam, and in fact, any person, not just a prince, may go outside with such bells. Ele shedibru chachamim bahoveh. But the rabbis mentioned princes because they were discussing the usual circumstance. Now, such bells are permitted because they are decorative. However, they must be sewn to the garment, as the Gemara writes on Masechet Shabbat, page 67a. For otherwise, they might fall off, or the wearer might take them off. And that is in Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.